I know there was a little bit of consternation. People came in today, the chairs in the wrong places. A lot of you couldn't find your spot. Came and got, you sit here, and the seats aren't set up right. It's a 1 week thing. We had a big day yesterday. We did a cleanup day in the morning, got a lot of little projects done then. And then last night we had it wasn't a mystery dinner theater because it wasn't, it was a mystery hors d'oeuvre theater. And it was a lot of fun. Everybody did a great job. A lot of work went into it. It turned out really well. Raising money last night for our partner, the Hard Places community in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. That's a ministry that we really, really like to connect with. What they do, you may not be aware of it, but if you're looking for fun topics to not think about in the real world, one of the things you don't like to think about is sexual tourism. And Cambodia is like in the epicenter of the world as far as sexual exploitation and tourism and all that kind of stuff. And we formed a partnership with Hard Places. Hard Places actually is in Phnom Penh and the other place north of there. What's it called? Siem Reap. And they have places there where they're working with the small children. The kids are just left out on the street most of the day by their parents. The parents may be nearby, maybe not. And so they've got a ministry to the children in Cambodia to try to steer them away from being exploited and taken advantage of. And it's a very, very powerful ministry, and we're very proud to be part of it. And we took a missions team in February over to work with them there and to help and encourage and all that. But our team also realized, and they did a great job thinking this through, that going is very, very expensive. And what we could do that would be more helpful would be to go occasionally, but even on years we don't go ahead and raise the money like we're going, and then send the money to them. So what they do is, this year they're able to hire more staff, they're able to increase, they got some amazing people working for them, so they're able to raise the income, the salary for their staff, so that they can do an even better job and not have to worry about their own finances as much. And so we're doing a great job, I think our church is, of raising money and staying aware and saying, it's not that important, that it's somewhat important we have boots on the ground in Cambodia, but it's more helpful for them if we're occasionally sending boots, but we're always sending the money and helping them do all they can do. And so we had that last night to help. And if you're concerned, I missed it, well, next Saturday, we're doing the Walk Against Traffic, which is also to support them. We believe this is Khmer for Walk Against Traffic. If you know Khmer, and it's not, tell me after the second service. I don't want to know right now. This says Walk Against Traffic for all I know, okay? The bottom definitely does. And how much, I believe in this. I believe this is just an amazing, they've done a great job, our missions team, of setting up a way to do ministry somewhere of people that need it and do it in a way that is very well thought out and very effective. And so I believe in this so much that they're doing the Walk Against Traffic next Saturday, and I'm going to participate. Now, there's two things, if you know about me, that make that really weird, hard to believe. Number one, this event will be outside. I'm not a big fan of outside. Outside's where God keeps the snakes and the bugs and the poison ivy and all that stuff. So, in plane crashes, they're always outside. Inside's just it's a better place. And we spend a lot of time developing the ability to be inside. But it's outside. I'm going anyway because I believe it involves running. I believe running promotes fear. And the only reason that you should run is because something that can hurt you is chasing you. And one of the reasons I work out a lot is so I can have fewer and fewer things that can hurt me, which gives me fewer and fewer reasons to run. But I believe in this enough that I will be going outside and actually running some of the 5K. And I think you should find ways, if you can be involved, if you can't do anything else except just go donate some money, that'd be great. But if you can be involved in this, the table's over there after the service. Now, the question that you might come up with is, why? Why are you expending this much energy? I mean, Cambodia is about as far away as you can get on planet Earth. When we flew over there in February, the flight we were on was the third longest flight, I think, third or seventh longest flight, commercial flight in the world. Was our flight from New York to Hong Kong, which didn't even get us there. I mean, it's a long way off. Why do we care so much about kids that far away? Which, of course, brings the next question. why do we care so much about kids here? Why are we so involved in providing food and support for kids and families in this area? Why in the world did our church, when we had the option to build an auditorium which would have wonderful acoustics and wouldn't have the echoing that you hear all the time here and there's no way to get rid of, why didn't we build an auditorium? Why did we build a gymnasium? Why do we have chairs that we have to set out every week? Why do we put them up every week so that people can practice karate and people who don't come to our church can come and play basketball late at night? Why do we do this and then let them, they put holes in our walls and why do we do that? Well, the reality is this comes from a basic belief we have that comes from the Bible. And if you want to, we're going to turn on your Bible to Genesis 1, and we're going to be talking about why that happens. And then it's going to logically flow out into the whole series we've been talking, because what we've been talking in the series is that you may not have noticed this, but we're in a really screwed up time in American history. I mean, we have been following a path, and that path has led us to a presidential election of Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, with the whole Colin Kaepernick thing on the sideline waving at us. It doesn't take a genius to tell you this is not necessarily the best path we could have taken. And we need to go back and rethink some things, to think through them biblically and spiritually and scripturally, and try to get in touch with what we believe God thinks, so that we can start living our lives in such a way that our grandkids don't have this wonderful choice when they get around to voting. Make sense? So that what we're going to do, we're going to Genesis 1, and I'm going to start with something, and I'm going to read you a passage that if you come to church here, I read probably 2 to 4 times a year, at least, because I think it's one of the most foundational truths in the Bible. It's the one that drives just about everything we do, and it drives just about how we could think about just about everything else. Genesis 1, I'm going to start in verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the ground, and the small animals that scurry along the ground." Excuse me. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Then God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground." If I'm going to talk to any person, including myself or you, the single most important truth I need to get when I talk to somebody, talk about somebody, know of anybody, is that person is made in the image of God. And we're going to talk about what that means. We're going to start at the very basics, and we're going to work our way up. And let me tell you in advance that wherever you are on the political spectrum, I will offend you. Somewhere along the way, you are going to be thinking, this is going well, I am agreeing with what he says, this is not a problem, and I will sneak in and step on your toes at that very second. So, if you wore sandals, bad choice, because the boots are on the day. Okay? And we're going to go through the whole thing, and wherever you lie on here, there will come a point you're going to say, "Oh, crap, he got to me." So, let's start at the beginning and work our way through this whole concept. We're going to work from the base up, and we're going to start with one of the 3 basic statements I'm going to make. And the first one is this: the image of God grants all people value and dignity. All people, value and dignity. It grants it to us. We don't have to earn it. It is inherited by us from the womb. We have value and dignity. Psalm 139 is amazing in this case. It says, "For you created my inmost being," talking about God. "You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth." I love those phrases, knit and woven. One thing you really got to understand, when God decided to create humans, he didn't walk to the Xerox room, stick a standard template on the top, and press 6 billion copies, go. He started and knit you together. Carved you is also referred to. Every time it talks about God creating us as humans, it's using it's defining it in ways that we can understand. It always talks about God using his very hands to make you uniquely you. And it's very important that you understand about yourself that God created you in his image, and that is an amazing, unique thing that happens to you, and it gives you incredible value, and it starts at the beginning. Jeremiah 1:5. That one talked about hidden place, Jeremiah 1:5. God's talking to Jeremiah, and he says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Galatians 1:15, God's talking to Paul a few thousand years later. But when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, again, he goes on to talk about his calling. He set me apart from my mother's womb, called me by his grace. The Bible is very clear, very, very, very clear that the child in the womb is fully human and valued by God. My favorite story about that is actually from Luke chapter 1. And God is predicting and giving a prophecy about this person named John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is going to be the... I'm not really good at modern culture stuff, but I think you'd call John the Baptist Jesus' MC. Though you guys are better at that stuff and younger, tell me later if I got that right. The guy, the hype man, he was Jesus' hype man. His job was to come before Jesus and explain and prepare people for Jesus to show up. So he's slightly older than Jesus, but only by a few months. And what it says here is that John the Baptist, from the time he's in his mother's womb, will be filled with God's Spirit. Well, that prophecy, we see it fulfilled just a few verses later. When John the Baptist's mom, Elizabeth, is now really, I know when you're pregnant or you're not pregnant, but it just seems like sometimes you're really, really pregnant toward the end. You know what I'm saying? You're leaning on stuff and resting your arm here and all this stuff. You're really, really pregnant. And so Elizabeth is now really, really pregnant. And God has appeared to Mary. You've heard Mary, the Virgin Mary, that one. And said, you're going to be with child, and your child will be the Son of God. He will be God incarnate, God made human. And so Jesus is in the barely pregnant, not quite showing Mary. Now, Mary knows something. She lives in a small community, and she is pregnant, and she is not married. And she knows what's coming. Now, you've probably never heard of somebody being shamed because they were pregnant without being married. You've never seen anybody deal with that, have you? And you probably have. So Mary decides to go stay with her cousin Elizabeth, the one who's very, very pregnant. Remember, it says that John the Baptist will be filled with God's Spirit from the time he's in his mother's womb. And that Jesus is the Son of God. He is divine. He is God. Well, Elizabeth is in her house. Mary walks in the house. And more importantly, John the Baptist is in the house, and Jesus, the Son of God, comes in the house. And the Bible tells us, you can read it later in Luke chapter 1, that when Jesus, the Son of God, comes in the house, that John the Baptist, because he's filled with the Spirit of God, immediately knows that Jesus is there, and he has a holy conniption fit. To put it in phrases that we might understand for some of your traditions, he gets out a hanky and starts waving it. He starts jumping up and down and shouting for Jesus. He is praising God in his mother's womb, so much so that Elizabeth's going, whoa, what's happening here? And there's almost like a bubbling up of God's Spirit into Elizabeth such that she starts praising God and going, man, Mary, I'm not sure what's going on, but what you got in there, that's God. And the two of them are individuals communicating through the Spirit to each other while they're still in their mother's wombs. So there's no way that we can deny from the Bible that God values that the person in the mother's womb is the image of God and has incredible value. But we also can't deny that there is a dignity that comes with that either. Let me read you this from Psalm chapter 8, Psalm number 8. What is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them? You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet. So, not only does every human have intrinsic value that cannot be taken away, every human has intrinsic dignity that should be respected. What's that mean? That means that the child in the womb is the image of God with incredible value and dignity. And so is the mother carrying the child. And anything I do that demeans the value and the dignity of the child in the womb goes against God's teaching, and anything that demeans the value and the dignity of the woman carrying the baby goes against God's values. Does that make sense? Okay? So when I look at somebody who has gotten themselves into a situation, if my judgmental light goes on and I start demeaning that person and devaluing that person because something has happened in their life, I'm in the wrong. Because we don't come in a state where we don't have value and we don't deserve dignity. And we can push that a little bit farther. That applies to the person who doesn't quite have everything together, as far as like someone who might be like, it's hard to get the phrase right here. Somebody who's handicapped, mentally handicapped, physically handicapped. They don't lose value or not have value because of that. Somebody who believes very differently than you does not lose value and does not deserve less dignity because of that. The most obnoxious person you know deserves dignity because they have value as the image of God no matter what. You have intense value and dignity because you are the image of God. It does not matter what has happened to you along the way. It does not matter what decisions you have made, no matter how dumb they may have been, how wrong they may have been. You still have the value as being the image of God, and you still deserve dignity. And some of you came today to be reminded of that reality, that God is absolutely crazy about you because you are his image. And all the stuff that's happened to you and all the stuff that you have done has not diminished that in any way. It's like if you take a diamond and you walk into a pig pen with a diamond, and you drop the diamond in the mud of the pig pen, and you grind it into the ground, and you leave it there with the pigs to march on it and wallow in it for 10 years. And the pigs just do all the stuff pigs do in, around, and on top of that diamond for 10 years, and then you go back with some strong, like 7-layered gloves, and you retrieve the diamond, and you pull it out, and you wash it up, and you shine it up. It has exactly the same amount of value that it had before. And it doesn't matter what you've been through, what has been done to you, or what you have done. There is nothing you can do to remove the fact that you are intrinsically valuable because you are made in the image of God, and you have the dignity that comes with that. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently, including yourself. What I tell people frequently, they start saying that inner talk you have, that self-talk you have, where you cut yourself down. Anybody else do that besides me? And your job in those situations is to call yourself a liar. Because God says this about me, and God's the one who's right. Are we clear? Okay. That's our first point. Second one. The image of God provides you with purpose and responsibility. The image of God provides you with purpose and responsibility. And we read in Genesis, they will reign, the humans will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. What that means is that each of us is given purpose by God. A lot of us spend a lot of time denying that. A lot of you in this room don't think you have a purpose in life. That you're just kind of, I have a pastor I know of who says, we got to get past the idea that the purpose of life is to make it out alive. There's a lot more to what God wants to do in my life. God creates everything with a purpose. Psalm 138 says, the Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. God created you for purpose or purposes to accomplish things for him. Now, the reason I said purpose and responsibility is because I run into people sometimes who say they want to discover God's purpose for their life. And I say, oh, what are you doing to find it? Well, I think about it a lot. Oh, that's a good idea. And sometimes I even pray about it. Good for you. You know how you find God's purpose for your life? This is the book of Steve, chapter 1, verse 18. Get off your butt. Okay? You have a purpose in life. You'll find it by doing stuff. Everybody just sitting waiting for God to write it on the sky. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been walking down the street or along the beach or anywhere in the world and looked up and God was writing something on the sky for somebody else? You ever caught God speaking that way to anybody? You ever been just sitting there and God speaks from heaven to the person next to you? I want you. Anybody ever have, they're walking down the beach and God writes something on the sky for the person next to them? Or God speaks from heaven to the person 3 people over? Then he's probably not going to do it for you either. Okay, if he was doing it all the time, you'd have seen it and you'd have heard it. The fact is, God gives us our purpose when we get off our butt and do stuff. And it's very important that we recognize we have responsibility. This is how God puts it instead of me. Psalm 138, Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. By the sweat of your faith you shall eat your bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. Proverbs 10:4. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Proverbs 19:15. Lazy people sleep soundly, but idleness leaves them hungry. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 and 12. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: the one who's unwilling to work shall not eat. Such people we command and urge in the Lord Jesus Christ to settle down and earn the food they eat. Now, that doesn't mean let people starve, but it ties back to what we talked about before. God wants you to work and earn. Do you know why? It goes back to dignity. You're made in the image of God, and so you have value and dignity. I always have my WVU cup. Everybody knows that, right? Because I'm from Central West Virginia. They recently a professor at, I think it was at WVU, came out with a report where he said there were 6 counties in West Virginia right now that are in a Great Depression, another Great Depression, because of the economic stuff that's going on. And one of the 6 is mine. I grew up in a county. Now I was more of a watcher of what was going on than a participant, because my family was able to make a very reasonable living. We were always fine. But I grew up where everybody got given everything. And I watched it take away the dignity to the point that people didn't even try to do anything. Every once in a while, somebody will come up to me and they'll say, hey, there's a church going to West Virginia to do ministry. I'll say, well, what are they doing? And I'll talk to the person and I go, oh, yeah, we're going to go give them clothes and food, and we're going to give. And I'm like, you're going to give them food? Yeah. Have you been there? No. Look around and count the number of fat people. It's shocking, and I'm not being mean here. You look around Clay County, West Virginia, you see almost everybody there is obese, or a significant percentage of people are obese. They don't need food. Somebody's going and giving them food. They don't need another television set. They don't need all the stuff we're giving them. They need the dignity and the responsibility of earning a living, because that's where we keep our dignity. When you go to somebody and just give, what you are taking in exchange is their dignity. And a person without dignity cannot stand on their own 2 feet, cannot live into the image of God. If I sound passionate about it, because it makes me mad. What people need is to understand who they are in the image of God, to understand that relationship they have with God, the value that they have, and to live into the responsibility to get a friggin' job. Okay, and I know it's hard some places. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying, wow, they should just go off and get an MBA. I know it's tough. But I'm not helping them if I don't teach them responsibility and dignity. And honestly, it has amazed me. Like I said, I grew up in there for a while. I don't know how it is right this second, but as far as people, the percentage of the population on welfare, the county I was in, Clay County, was the #1 county in the state of West Virginia in per capita welfare recipients. And West Virginia was the #1 state in the union for per capita welfare recipients. Now, I don't know if that meant we were #1 in the nation. There may have been somewhere, because we've always got Alabama to help us out. And Mississippi. There's a few other states that help us just, to get proud to be number 48 at something instead of 50. But I do know what it does to people. And I've seen how it does. And I've always been amazed growing up in an incredibly rural, poor place to see how similar it is to what happens when you grow up in an urban, poor place. How similar urban poverty is to rural poverty. It's amazing how much alike it is. And so I can see and I understand. We have to maintain dignity. We have to be smart. There was a book came out not long ago called When Helping Hurts. And the concept of the book was how often we think we're doing somebody good and we haven't thought through. That's what I love about our Cambodia thing is we've thought it through, our people thought it through very carefully to make sure we're helping in a way that helps. They point out the concept, okay, what if there's this village in Africa and your church raises all this, everybody donates shoes and everybody takes all these shoes and gives them to the village in Africa. What happens to the guy who made a living making shoes? If we send them all this food, what happens to the farmer? We have to think, how do we help with dignity? Because make no doubt about it, we are called to help. That's the last of my three statements. The image of God carries influence and accountability. Verse 28 of Genesis. Then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. We have the ability to change things. I mean, we talked about prayer last series about the importance how we can change things through prayer, but we have the ability to change things. I don't mean this badly. We can do a ton of stuff just doing it. We can take mountains and turn them into flat land. We can choose to do amazing things, and the Bible calls us to use that ability to actually help, to do good things. Let me read you some verses. Isaiah 1:17. Learn to do good, seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the cause of orphans, fight for the rights of the widows. Proverbs chapter 31, verses 8 and 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Proverbs 24:11 and 12. You might not like this one. Rescue those who are unjustly sentenced to die. Save them as they stagger to their death. Don't excuse yourself by saying, look, we didn't know. For God understands all hearts, and he sees you. Now, I can sense, I know what's happening right now. Because when I start talking like this, Satan starts lying to you about something. It sounds reasonable, but it's a lie that he'll plant right here, and you'll carry it with you as you leave if I'm not careful to diffuse it right now. And that lie is, I feel guilty, therefore I should help. And the reason Satan plants that lie in your head is guilt won't last. But he knows if you walk out of here feeling guilty, you will go out and you will help a couple people, you'll do a couple things, and you'll make the guilt go away, and then you'll quit. Because guilt is a terrible long-term motivator. And it's not the reason God calls us to care for the poor and the needy and the ones that are hurting. It's not the reason he does it. Well, why does he do it? Well, let me take you to an incident in Jesus' life. Jesus it's his last night. He's going to be crucified the next day. And he gathers his immediate followers, his handful of his special selected guys, and he wants to teach them an incredible lesson. And in John chapter 13, verse 3 of that says something that is just mind-boggling. It says in verse 3, Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and would return from God. And if you don't put the next verse up just yet, I want you to stop and just think about that point. Jesus, as the Son of God, the Bible says he grew in wisdom. So he grew and knew more and more about who he really was as he grew up. I don't know how God did that. We call it the veiling of himself. He veiled his authority. But as he grew, he knew more and more about his real purpose and his real destiny and who he really was. And at this point, he is in the room with the roughly dozen people, and God has fully revealed himself to Jesus. The veil is pretty much taken away, and Jesus knows exactly who he is. He knows at that moment, possibly for the first time in his human experience, that he is God. That he doesn't just have the ability to do miracles, that he's the one who spoke the universe into existence. And that when this is over, he's going to be back on the throne in heaven with God. He is fully aware of that fact. And what he does next is insane. Because it says the next thing, verse 4, so he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet. God at the moment, God in Jesus Christ, at the moment he knew his full authority and his full power, chose to use that power and to use that authority to help those who were less powerful than himself. And if you stop and think about it for just a second, what is the message? What is the story of the Bible? If there's only one story in the Bible, and there really is, what is that story? The story is of an all-powerful God who speaks the universe into existence, and he creates these image of God people who screw up everything. And the story of the Bible is the most powerful being in the universe leveraging his power to help the powerless. Now, if you are the image of God, what were you created and called to do? The exact same thing. And you do not do it because you feel guilty about not doing it. You do it because that is the way that you live into the person God created you to be. Because that is the ultimate fulfillment of the image of God in you. Because you will find a purpose and a destiny and a passion and a fulfillment beyond anything you can imagine in your life by living into who God called you to be as a person who leverages the power and the authority that God's placed in you to help those who do not have power. It is the message throughout the Bible. It is the message of the Bible. It is our responsibility. And it is our purpose. In trying to figure out, my job is to explain things. That's what I do. I don't create truth. I just explain things. I came across a guy who explained part of, for me, really well. See, I talked about where I grew up, but I didn't grow up bad. Don't ever think I grew up bad. I mean, honestly, if life was a game, you know, a video game, when you first turn on a video game on your Xbox, the first thing you do is go to the settings area. Those of you who don't know geek, let the person next to you explain it to you. You have a bunch of settings, and sometimes you create a character, and one of the settings you do is you set the difficulty of the game. And I remember I've played games, and sometimes they get creative in the way they describe the difficulty settings, and the very top one is like, Hello Kitty difficulty setting, It's just insanely easy. And then it works its way down, medium, hard, and at the bottom is insane and you'll never win. Okay, I am a middle-class white male who grew up in a loving, nurturing family with parents who still hold hands, with siblings who get along. I grew up with well-educated parents who made sure I got educated, and I have the intelligence to take advantage of that opportunity. I started life on the Hello Kitty setting. I can't imagine giving anybody a better head start than I got in my basic settings. I didn't choose it. I didn't earn it. I just got given the easiest setting possible in the game of life. I recognize that if you tweak any one of those things, the setting gets a little more difficult. Honestly, if you make me female instead of male, it's a little more difficult. In this culture, difficulty goes up. If you change my ethnicity, a little more tough. I don't know how many times the fact that I am just a white adult middle-class male means I get treated by authorities one way and other people get treated a different way. I see it all the time. If I didn't have the intellect I have, if I didn't have the education from my parents, if my parents had divorced early, if I grew up in a place where my mom didn't even know who my dad was, if I was born addicted to a drug because my mom was an abuser, it would be a very different game for me. Now, I know people who have my settings who fail. I know people who they've got all the advantages I had and they still manage to screw up the game of life. But I know a whole lot more of us who succeeded. And as the difficulty setting gets harder, there's nothing wrong with me acknowledging that I was very fortunate. And B, that's power that God has given me. And if I'm going to live into the image of God, I have to look for ways to leverage that power for those who didn't get the advantages that I had, to help them live into their purpose and their dignity and their value. And before we go there, I can't change everything. I can't fix it all. I'm not called to fix it all. I came across this guy. He wrote this. I thought it was pretty good. The best way to look at this might be to recognize that you probably can't fix these things. They'll always be around. But maybe you can put your thumb on the scale a little to help the people at the margins. I think that's what we're called to do. I think it's what Jesus teaches us to. Jesus didn't go out and erase all the problems, but every time he saw one he could put his thumb on and make it a little easier for the person, he did it. Every time he could speak value to a person, he did it. And when I define it that way, that I am a person who believes that we are all created in the image of God, that we all have dignity, that we all have purpose and responsibility, and that I have the authority and the responsibility and the accountability to make a difference, I suddenly go back to where I started in the message. And while I didn't say it this way because I wanted to work you to hear, we are called as followers of Christ to be totally and completely pro-life. That means that it starts in the womb and it never ends. That my calling is to help every individual, to stand up to every individual. And if I'm going to help create a world where a woman thinks the best thing she can do is abort her baby, I need to change that world. If there's a woman who is pregnant and thinks there is no way my child can succeed because the deck is too stacked against them and thinks abortion's the best answer, A, it's not the best answer, but B, I need to get her into a better playing field. I need to do what I can to change. Let me read you this. This is a guy named Simcha Fisher wrote this. He says, it's easy for a candidate to say 3 syllables, I'm pro-life. It's harder for a president or a state rep or a governor to sign bills that would shape a world in which a pregnant woman realizes, maybe I can do this. Do not tell me that a candidate is pro-life when every policy and attitude a candidate promotes would push a mother to kill her child. I won't have it. I won't sit back and let that happen to the phrase pro-life. Just because I got the easy game doesn't mean I can deny somebody else got the hard game. And my job is to make it so that that woman believes there's enough hope to keep that baby alive and let it grow into all that God created it to be. Not for me to hold up a sign and call her names because we've taught her she has no hope. We've taught her that child isn't going to be perfect, so you need to get rid of it. We've taught her there is no way to get out of this community. Well, I need to do something. I may not know what the heck it is. But I can't be voting in such a way that I am enforcing the idea that you don't have hope because of where you came from. I can't stand up and speak to people and say, this person has no hope. My job, we are agents of hope. We've got a God who spent entire history bringing hope to the hopeless. What other job can I have but to bring hope to the hopeless? To speak for those. You go back and read those verses now we read earlier about how we're supposed to stand up for the poor and to speak about justice for the oppressed. And suddenly you realize, how can I do anything else? With what God's done for me, what other choice do I have but to live into what God made into me so that I can speak truth, I can speak love, I can speak hope to everybody. I can point you toward the God of hope because He is hope. Well, Jesus put it this way. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who's been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. And I know most of the people in this room didn't have as easy a settings as I've had. But I will say that I doubt there's anybody in this room who wouldn't agree that you've been entrusted with much. That if you look me in the eye, you say, God has been good. He may have had to get me out of some mistakes that I made, some bad decisions I made. He may have had to rescue me from a really bad set of game settings to begin the process. But God's been good. I've been entrusted with much. My job is to take what I've been entrusted with and take that hope to others. Now, obviously, we've been talking about the image of God in you. And that story of God reconciling creation. And you don't want to walk away. I can't let you walk away without reminding you that if you do not have that relationship that Jesus Christ died for, that God loved the world so much he came for you. If you don't have that, you need that relationship with God. And so I'd encourage you today, during this next song or at the end of the service, if you don't have a relationship with God, we have these blue bags. We have some here and here and there and there. And if you see all those people who scurry at that point, you know what? I never explain this. You know what that is? That's people who are anticipating you making a decision today, getting in position so they're ready when you make it. We got people who scurry over there to pray with you, so if you want to pray, they're ready so you can pray with them. If you grab a blue bag, they're back there ready to talk to you. So all these people are there doing that because they believe it's important that you have a relationship with Christ. And if you're ready for that relationship, you grab a blue bag. Somebody who's trained will take 10 minutes, walk you through the bag, show you how to have that relationship with Christ, and start living into the image of God in you. After you have accepted Christ, the next thing is to announce it. Say, I'm on this team. This is where I vote. This is where I stand. I stand with the followers of Christ. And we do baptisms to announce that. We do it once a month. Let us know. We'd be glad to get you involved in the next baptism. Like I said already, if you want to pray, we've got a cross over there. We can go and just pray about anything God puts on your heart. If you want to pray with somebody, we've got people that are ready to pray with you. Just ask them. We've got communion stations in the front and the back that can remind you just how much Christ did for you. So that as you go back out, you recognize we don't do this out of guilt. We do this out of our purpose. That Jesus Christ loved the world so much that he died for me so I could take his love and his hope and his message elsewhere. Jesus said, from everyone who's been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who's been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. You've been entrusted with a lot. Live into that. Don't reject it. Live into it. And be God's agent of hope in a hopeless world.